The outrage continues with the updated sentencing guidelines effective from the 1st of April, which, if you missed my first video, quite literally means, in a technical sense at least, that if you are white British, you are more likely to get a custodial sentence as against a community sentence than if you were from an ethnic minority, or indeed if you were female or transgender. Check out my previous video for full context, because it's never quite as simple as that. But the outrage is so ridiculous now that even the government doesn't agree with those sentencing guidelines, to the extent that the Lord Chancellor herself, Shabana Mahmood, says that there will never be a two-tier system approach under this Labour government, and the Sentencing Council is entirely independent. However, that's just really not true, because, as I said in my video yesterday, in a very technical sense, it is true. It is a two-tier system, quite literally a two-tier system. Although, as I said, it's not quite as simple as that. Watch my first video for full context, but I will take you to this short snippet here, because this to me just says that there is no harmony between government and the sentencing guidelines. But while I play you this clip, if you would do me the favour of subscribing to the channel, I depend on you to grow my channel. I would really like to hit 1 million subscribers so that I know that I've helped at least 1 million people. So thank you for doing that. Let's get into this clip.
And then let me just say finally, as somebody who's of an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind, and there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch or under this Labour government.
Now, I have to say, I really appreciate those comments, because you can see that she's actually very frustrated at this, and she doesn't agree with it. And so it is reassuring that from the Justice Minister herself, we hear that there will not be a two-tier system. However, a brief recap of the guidelines yesterday, effective from the 1st of April from the Sentencing Council, do say that there will be a pre-sentence report normally necessary if you are from one of these groups. So again, more on my video from yesterday. But there's a further problem with this. Now, there's a further post, I think a previous post from Ms. Mahmood here, where she said, quite rightly, that the Sentencing Council is entirely independent. So I think people do need to appreciate that the Sentencing Council is entirely separate. I've said in a number of videos before now that if you have an issue with sentencing for a particular crime and there's a disparity between two different crimes, one person walks free, the other one goes to jail for a long time, it's the sentencing guidelines that you need to look to, because those are what the judges must work to, else the sentence may be open to appeal. But the problem here is this. Her post, and it's not with her post, but her post says this: the Sentencing Council is entirely independent. Today's updated guidelines do not represent my views, she says, or the views of this government. So that is a fair comment to say that this is not the views of the Labour government, which many people might say that it is, because in fact, these guidelines were drafted beforehand. More about that in a second. She says, I'll be writing to the Sentencing Council to register my displeasure and to recommend reversing this change to the guidance. As someone who's from an ethnic minority background myself, she says, I do not stand for any differential treatment, as she said in this video clip, before the law for anyone of any kind. There will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch. But, as you'll note, there is a community note here, which points back to these minute meetings, which I have in this document here. Now, this to me is the perfect example of things happening in the background that you don't know about, that when they eventually come to be, everybody gets upset about it. And obviously, that's what's happened here. Everybody is outraged by these guidelines because it, on the face of it, appears to be a two-tier system. For reasons I explained in my video yesterday, it's not quite as simple as that, and I sort of trust, and at least hope that I trust, that it won't work out like that. But again, watch my previous video for that. But in a moment, I'm going to go into some detail about the digging that I did to find out when this actually first came to be. And it might surprise you, because one of those things that the people that know don't care, and the people that care don't know. And so if you really do care about these things, stick around for the second half of this video, when I'm going to show you exactly how this happened in the background. But speaking of things that you might not be aware of, and to keep this video interesting and rather spicy, there's another story that you may not be aware of. You may have read that Meta has now ended its fact-checking program as of the 1st of March of this year. It began in 2016 and came under huge controversy after the COVID-19 outbreak, with, ironically, some of the fact-checking itself proving to be incorrect or at least overly definitive in what it said. For example, to do with the transmission of the disease, the origins of the disease, or even the side effects of the vaccines themselves. So recently, Meta has announced, in Mark Zuckerberg's words himself, more speech and fewer mistakes, in removing the fact-checking in favor of a community notes type thing that you've seen on X. Now, what I found really interesting about this is the difference in the headlines in reporting this story. The headlines from left-leaning news outlets had a very different spin on them to those from right-leaning outlets, and I'm going to show you what I mean. For example, if we take one or two examples of headlines from left outlets, we can see that they distinctly focus on concerns over misinformation and that Meta might be bowing down to Donald Trump as he became president. For example, from Chicago Sun-Times, Meta eliminates fact-checking in latest bow to Trump. From Teen Vogue, Mark Zuckerberg's in his Trump era and throwing facts out the window. From Time magazine, Meta ends fact-checking, prompting fears of misinformation. And one of my favorites from Alternet, Facebook follows X down the path to becoming right-wing cesspool. But now if we compare some of those from headlines from right-leaning outlets, we can see that in fact, they are just more in favor of freedom of expression. For example, from True North News, Mark Zuckerberg to dramatically reduce the amount of censorship on Meta platforms, a very different take on the headlines from left-leaning outlets. From the Ohio Star, Meta ends censorship on Facebook, ditches third-party fact-checkers. From the Counter-Signal, Meta copies Musk's vision as Zuckerberg promises free speech revival. And again, probably one of my favorites from Patriot Journal, Facebook fires woke censors, vows to restore free speech to the platform. So as you can see, very different headlines from very different outlets. And that is absolutely crucial because depending on what you read, it will have an impact on how you think about these events. And that is why I am very pleased to partner for this video with Ground News, which is both an app and a website that will pull these different headlines together on one platform to make sure that you are not being swayed or influenced to the left or the right without you knowing about it. The way that it does that, it provides you a bias distribution to tell you whether the outlet is left or right leaning and how many of each outlet are covering the story. It also provides you a factuality score, which gives you a guidance as to how trustworthy the news source is. So if you're reading something that isn't particularly reliable, at least you'll know that it's known for not being too reliable, so you don't place much faith in what it says. And one way Ground News does all of this is by providing you a breakdown as to ownership. Who owns the news outlets of headlines that you are reading? Now, sometimes, of course, there's going to be a story that is disproportionately covered by the left or the right. And that is why Ground News has a blind spot feature which will show you those stories that are disproportionately covered by the left or right-leaning outlets. Now, people often ask me how I research these stories and how I stay unbiased and give you both sides of the picture. Well, Ground News helps me to do exactly that. And you know that I wouldn't recommend a company to you unless I would personally use it myself. And so Ground News helps me to find both sides of a given story. And of course, as they're a partner to my channel, I get you a fantastic discount, which is 40% off. That's 40% off unlimited access to the world's news, both left and right, to give you a balanced view. Using my code BBB with the link, which is ground.news/BBB. The link's in the description below, and I'll put it on screen as well. So make sure you get your discount of 40% off using this code so you'll get unlimited access and unbiased access to the world's news, which is what I aim to bring you on this channel. So check out Ground News, and I thank them for sponsoring this video. Now back to the minutes from the Sentencing Council meetings and where these changes first originated. Now please bear with me because there's a lot to unpick and unravel here. First of all, it would be unfair to blame this Labour government for these sentencing guidelines because they are separate and distinct. Shabana is right, they are independent. And secondly, this is not new. It's just that now it's come to the forefront of attention. So for that, please do subscribe to my channel if you want these updates. Now, let's look at this. The first thing to note of this document here is this is a minutes document of the meeting of the 24th of January 2025. So this is relatively fresh. The second thing to note is that there's a representative here, no ministers mind, but a representative of the Lord Chancellor, Claire Fielder, and for the Lady Chief Justice, Jacqueline Beard. Now, this does reference the ethnic minority background, which, again, we're going to go back in history for just a brief moment. This discussion here was to discuss the proposed amendments to the text regarding female offenders and those from an ethnic minority background and young adult offenders from ethnic minority background, and they agreed a simplified revision of the flowchart and agreed to separate it from the rest of the documents. And if we look at these here, all that's talking about is this flowchart right down the bottom. I believe it's this flowchart here, but that's less important than what I'm about to say. Back to these minutes here. So these minutes refer back to and agree the minutes of the meeting of the 20th of December 2024. But it's not even as simple as that, because if we go back even further, which I did, I reviewed all of the minute meetings right back to 2021 of the Sentencing Council. You can see these documents here. They're all freely available on the website because this is a public justice system. We can see the first, or what appears to be the first reference to amending these guidelines back in June 2022. Now, important to note that the current guidelines came to be in 2017. That's this document here, which affects those who are sentenced on or after the 1st of February 2017, which is that bit here, if you can see it, if I zoom in. And this referenced the pre-sentence reports as well. But obviously this was missing a lot of what is now in these updated guidelines. So very briefly, as I said, you'll have to bear with me to get the full context here, which I like to do. These current guidelines, as in before they change on the 1st of April, say as follows. In many cases, a pre-sentence report will be pivotal in helping a court decide whether to impose a community order and, if so, whether particular requirements or combinations of requirements are suitable for an individual offender. Whenever the court reaches the provisional view that a community order may be appropriate, it should request a pre-sentence report, whether verbal or written, and those are the different ones. And so if it's more serious, it should be a written one. If it's less serious, just a verbal report, unless the court is of the opinion that the report's unnecessary in all the circumstances of the case. And that may be either really not that serious or really serious, and so actually just don't need one. It may be helpful to indicate to the National Probation Service the court's preliminary opinion as to which of the three sentencing ranges is relevant for the purposes of sentencing, and the package of requirements is expected to fulfill. And I'll just pause there because this is really important, because actually one thing that's being reported at the moment is that there's an increasing, I think it's up by a third or something, the number of people that are recalled to prison having been released on license. Released on license just means if you get a 5-year term, you serve half or 40% or whatever in custody and then the rest on license. And so on license means you can be recalled back to prison to complete the remainder of that sentence. That can be either if you commit a further offence, or, which a lot of people don't realise, you failed to turn up to a meeting. You failed if you've got an alcohol abstinence requirement and you're found to be drinking, you're found to be drunk and disorderly. You can be hauled back to prison without any more need for further offending or convictions or whatever. You can just be recalled back to prison. So this is really important because the work with the probation service, and obviously in my work, I've come to know some probation officers, etc. We turn up at court, etc. And so you do have these conversations and you do get to hear what really goes on. So that's just really important for context. So back to this here. The National Probation Service opinions and the court's preliminary opinion as to which of the three sentences is appropriate, which a package of requirements. Ideally, it goes on, a pre-sentence report should be completed on the same day to avoid adjourning the case. If an adjournment cannot be avoided, the information should be provided to the National Probation Service in written form, etc. However, the court must make clear to the offender that all sentencing options remain open, including appropriate cases committal for sentence in the Crown Court. And so this is just a very broad guideline on sentencing reports, and then goes on to custodial sentences, which we call imposition, imposing a custodial sentence, the threshold, etc. So that's the current guideline as it is. Now, if we go way back to the minutes of the meeting of the 17th of June 2022, and we have a look here, again, there's a representative of the Lord Chief Justice, representative of the Lord Chancellor, and if we scroll down to 4.1, it says here, discussion on imposition of the custodial sentence, etc. The Council considered and agreed to a proposal to undertake a standalone review of the imposition of community and custodial sentences guidelines and to consult on any changes proposed. That was way back in 2022, long before this Labour government. So all of these changes began, if you like, it appears, right back at this meeting when they agreed to this standalone review. Then there was a consultation, etc., which I won't go into in this video. But then if we skip forward in time to the 21st of June of last year, again, before this Labour government, these meetings confirm as follows. In 3.1, under the discussion of imposition, the Council considered further consultation findings, so they looked through the consultation, the findings of that, and again, referring to my previous video, the disparity in sentences, which is wrong if there are disproportionate sentences for ethnic minority groups, which very broadly found that they were more likely to get a lengthy sentence compared to a white British person, for example, which is of course wrong. Then it says here, the Council considered the further consultation findings on the proposed revised imposition guideline. So it's been revised in the meantime, specifically on the pre-sentence report, which we're talking about here. The Council agreed to retain the list of cohorts for whom a PSR will normally be considered necessary, with one additional cohort and several amendments to the existing cohorts. The Council also agreed to adding lines indicating that cohorts list is non-exhaustive and various amendments to the subsections on the indication of probation and adjournments on committal. The Council will consider further responses in relation to the remaining sections. However, the first explicit reference I can find to ethnic minority backgrounds and females and so on is in this draft imposition of community and custodial sentences revision from November 2023. And again, we can see that under the section for pre-sentence reports here. However, it's not worded quite in the same way. So under pre-sentence reports here, it simply says a pre-sentence report may be particularly important if the offender is risk of a sentence of 2 years or less. That could be because it's, a lower sentence, and importantly, it can be suspended if it's under 2 years. Between 14 days and 2 years, it can be a suspended sentence. Oddly, not under 14 days for some reason, but there we go. A young adult, obviously, I mentioned for previous reasons yesterday, female, pregnant, sole primary carer, or, as it says here, from an ethnic minority, cultural minority, or faith minority background. And so this draft appeared in November 2023. And then we can look to the minutes of December 2024, which appear to amend these paragraphs and says, the Council agreed to a variety of changes to these sections and subsections, including the introductory paragraph to the guideline, final drafts to the cohort subsections, and a final draft of the effectiveness of sentencing, determined orders, etc. Minor amendments were also agreed throughout the guideline, including the new text requirements on suspended order paragraph and a line on offenders with more complex needs in the adjournments paragraph in the pre-sentence report section. And then finally, we come to the text from the January 2025 meeting, which says the Council agreed proposed amendments to the text regarding female offenders from an ethnic minority background and young adult offenders from an ethnic minority background, and agreed to simplify his revised flowchart and so on. So you can see the history there. There's various changes throughout this process over several years in response to the consultation. So I have to say that I hope and I trust that the consultation revealed the need to produce these guidelines to try to deal with several problems. Firstly, there's a disparity in sentencing. Secondly, there's people being recalled to prison. And there's all sorts of other things that they need to consider. But I have to say, at the end of the day, when the public see a document like that says, if you belong to this group, you are normally going to get a pre-sentence report, which is pivotal in not going to prison, people will only ever see that as a two-tier system. However well-intentioned this whole thing is, with great respect, I think most people will see that as a two-tier system. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm trying to be as balanced and fair as possible. And of course, I understand the needs, I understand the reasons, I understand the legal justification, the measures, the necessary steps they need to take reasonable and proportionate steps to achieve a legitimate aim and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, somebody once commented just the other day that justice needs to be seen to be fair as well as actually being fair and just in the process. So if it is not seen to be fair, that is unjust in and of itself. Let me know what you think. Let me know whether you agree. Let me know whether this has changed your mind. Either way, I'm not trying to change your mind either direction, by the way. I'm trying to be as unbiased and impartial as possible. So let me know what you think. Let me know if this has changed what you think. Don't forget to check out Ground News if you want a balanced view on the news that you read. And as always, thank you for watching.